Welcome to Rise from Lausanne, Switzerland, where skiing, while it is a naturally socially distant activity, waiting in the ski lift lines is absolutely not, as I personally experienced this past weekend on a beautiful day of skiing. I am Professor Demian Hodari of EHL Lausanne.
And from my second home in Cape Town, South Africa, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and how's it? And thank you for joining us on Rise. We are excited to have you with you. We're excited to have you with us. Episode 27. We are going into December. My goodness, Demian, I have no idea where this year has gone, but we're in the run up to the end of year. And what an exciting year it's been. What an incredible year we have ahead of us. We had no idea what we were entering into this year as we entered into the new world. As we always say, Rise is about the next normal. It's all about trying to figure out what we have ahead of us, separate the news from the noise. And as we've always said, we are here for you, with you, and because you. So as we say that, I have some very exciting news that is hot off the press. The team at Rise, the production team backstage, our Wizards of Oz, the Grouch, and myself, we are very excited to share that we are going to go into season 3. In January, we have another season of Rise coming up. Why? Because we're going into the next normal. And as you'll see with today's program, we have an incredible year ahead of us. And we look back at an incredible year behind us. So before I get more excited about season 3, Demian, why don't you tell everyone what's happening today?
Yeah, today's episode is Rise Back to the Future. What we thought we would do is, since it's been roughly 6-7 months since we launched Rise and since we had our first guest, was to go back to season 1 and invite some of our guests from that season to update us on what they are thinking now about what they had, let's say, thought about back then about now. In other words, how have their views changed about their industry, their firms, their careers, and what's been going on in the world? And so we've got a selection of executives from season 1 that are going to be sharing those views with us in just a little while. But before that, as always, we have a question for you. But unlike other episodes, this is not a poll, but we have a simple question for you, which is the following. What topics do you want us to cover in season 3 of Rise? Send us an idea or two. It could be an industry, it could be a theme, a question you've got, somebody you'd like to have on the show, something you'd like to see Anita wearing. All right. You can always send us an email as well. You'll see our email address at the end, or write us on LinkedIn with your ideas. We'd really appreciate that. And do keep an eye on LinkedIn. We will have another question for you on LinkedIn later in the week.
Brilliant. So December 7th, as much as we talk about season 3, where in the world are we right now? And I know everyone is tired of me saying it. I've said it before, and I'm sure I'm going to say it again. My goodness, what a 2 weeks it's been. It's been 2 weeks since we had our last live feature. We had our last Rise in Practice this past week. And we go into now, where are we in the world? This I thought was really important. As we've seen, there are now 4 companies around the world that have actually come out and said they have vaccines with extremely high rates of ability to make us get into the next normal with a high degree of confidence. However, as much as the medical industry is gearing up for production of hundreds of millions of vaccine shots, and as much as the global aviation industry is working tirelessly to make sure that they can safely, swiftly, and stably, if that's a word, get those vaccines around the world in an unprecedented supply chain that is colder than we've ever seen for any global movement before, we see that not everyone wants to take the vaccine. I thought this was very interesting. And this came from a study that was done by a Swiss group that is very much focusing on making sure that all of us have the information we need, especially the medical fraternity, to get an understanding of where do people think they need to see the industry going. It's a group called Springer Link. This was a study that was conducted in June of 2020 with over 2,000 people in Europe, and 50% of people don't want the first round. A lot of that is caused by the speed at which the vaccine was actually created. It often takes much longer. However, as we know from the medical community, The basics, the foundations of this study were already strong to begin with. This has now been done for a very specific COVID-19, but the foundations were in place, but still 50% of the people don't want to take it. And a significant number, I thought, was very interesting, that it's females. But we see that there's caution. So ultimately, what's going to get travel, tourism, and hospitality moving again? It's going to be quick testing at the airports, before departure, when people land, so that as the vaccine rolls out, as confidence is created, we can still create the confidence in alternative ways. But I thought this was fascinating.
I'm going to jump in with two questions for you, just real quick, Anita. One is, do you think these numbers will have come down since this study was done? We've got more of this pandemic fatigue. We're so tired of it. Maybe we're more willing to take the vaccine, and also maybe news about the vaccines that multiple companies have come up with it, the 95% reliability factor. So maybe this number's come down a bit, but I think the idea that people are hesitant is probably still prevalent.
I think you make a really good point. And I think to really capture that, the grouch is tired of being grouchy. People are tired of having stayed in and having been forced to cut off the mobility and the social contact of their lives. So while people might have said something, Demian, you're absolutely right, 6 months ago, how they feel 6 months on absolutely might have shifted. So this is a really interesting one around what people feel they needed 6 months ago versus, oh my goodness, they now just need to get out. You're absolutely right.
And I think there's a second thing. I haven't read as much about this, so I may be off, but I have seen discussions of people having a stamp to say they've been vaccinated, and that's going to make travel easier than having to get tested regularly, having the vaccine certification. I'm not sure how prevalent that's going to be, whether it's going to be accepted by multiple countries, but it'll be interesting to see how the idea of being vaccinated is going to play out in our ability to function day to day in terms of the trust we can create with other people.
Indeed. And please God, it creates some regularity around protocols and regulations, because that alone is causing a lot of people to just not take the risks. Too much is changing too quickly. Absolutely right.
All right.
And now we move to the next one. I thought this was really interesting, because we're talking about very much the health of our industry, and it comes down to hotels significantly. And this is actually a reflection of the industry as a whole. STR put this out recently, and looking at ultimately the health of the hotel sector in terms of where it's going to be driven by. It's domestic leisure leading up to domestic business. That's where we know the momentum is going to start coming in terms of demand. But what does that require? Hotels need to open, borders need to open, businesses need to open. So there's a really interesting relationship taking place while, as we've said through this entire next normal in season 2, while there is interest, there has to be access. And without that access and that interest in combination, and in a very strong rhythm for momentum of performance getting regulated and sustainably, confidently back on track, it's going to be a really tricky one. I thought this was very interesting to see the natural progressions rather than, as we've said, going back to normal. There's no back and there's no normal. It's next normal, next normal, next normal.
So speaking about hotels, HotStats put out some data last week talking about GOPPAR, which is gross operating profit per available room. So a measure of the overall profitability in the hotel sector. And what was interesting were a couple points here. One was, if you look at the US first, positive $5.43 US per available room. First time since I think it was February that the US has a positive number. So pretty important as an indication of maybe a little bit of improvement there in the industry. Europe, on the other hand, at negative €5 after having had 2 positive months back in August and September. So again, we talked about that summer boost in travel, which may improve the performance of hotels, and we're starting to see that decline. Middle East and APAC areas have been outperforming. Obviously, they've got the virus under more control in a lot of those areas and a little bit further along in redeveloping tourism. The other point here is that this US number, how temporary is that? We're starting to see California's in full lockdown again as of today. We're starting to see more restrictions in businesses there. Europe is already, again, as we know, has been doing this for the last month or so, and it's probably going to continue through a lot of the winter. So it's not an indication that things are getting better on the long term, but it was nice to see the US in positive territory, even though that number is apparently 95% less than it was a year ago. So it's a small number, but it is positive, and it's an interesting thing, I think, to look at. I have another piece of data for you, which is from Switzerland and the ski industry. Reservations for the Christmas holiday, school holidays are down apparently 20% year on year. That's a huge number, 20%. But I actually thought it was going to be much worse than that. I actually am shocked that 80%, that we've reached 80% of last year's figure. So only a negative 20% decline during this pandemic. Terrible number, obviously, if you're in the industry, this is devastating, but it's not as bad as I personally thought, and I'm not sure what you think. And if you look at the minus 28% number, that's ski holiday bookings for the entire upcoming winter. We're down 30% roughly year on year. And I thought what was interesting was the Swiss are still planning to open and maintain open the ski resorts. And remember that other countries are saying, yes, you're welcome to ski. We're just not going to operate the lifts. So you've got to use your seal skin or et cetera to climb if you want to ski down. Switzerland is operating the lifts. Austria just came out with an announcement saying that they're going to open for the Christmas season, but largely only for Austrians and not for visitors who are going to have quarantine if they come from Germany, Switzerland, Italy, which makes it pretty difficult to go and have a ski holiday there. Switzerland is still accepting most people from most countries, which makes it a little bit easier to come here. So there's a little bit of uncertainty in the ski industry in the Alps, especially with Switzerland leading the way, saying we will open. Although, given what happened this past weekend that I alluded to in my opening, where people were crowded like sardines to get onto the lifts, we may see some changes next week here in Switzerland.
Interesting, Demian, I just want to pause on this for a second because you've mentioned something so critical, and we've talked about this in the next normal. Even while there is the incredible hope and the desperation for the sector to open up, it's not reopening in the fullness of experience it had before. And to your point, the ski resort is opening, which is highly season sensitive in terms of being able to squeeze in as much as they can gain in revenues during that window of snow. But the resorts are not operating some ski lifts. Are they operating all the restaurants? Are all the fireplaces burning? And I found this when I was leaving Heathrow this weekend, and I saw it when I went to Tbilisi for the Executive Council a few months ago for the UN. You go to the airport and the airport's functioning, but there's no retail. The food and beverage is limited. And if you think of the revenue that has been completely choked as a result, so the challenge of the next normal is the limitation of the experience and how that's going to make people question, why am I really bothering to go, and what's the experience going to be like? So it's heartbreaking in so many ways.
Yeah, we couldn't eat lunch on the mountain. You could get a tea or a coffee or a hot dog to go, but then you had to go and eat it outside, and it was pretty cold. So we just skied until we couldn't anymore, and then left. And I think a lot of people are going to either bring their sandwiches, et cetera. But exactly, I was there kind of for research, quote unquote, right, to get a feel for what it was like. And it clearly wasn't the same experience. It was still great to be out there skiing, but it lacked some of the charm and fun of past years. But let's see how it develops over the next few months.
Dear. And we're going in the right direction. We're moving towards opening up. So safely, cautiously.
We got a few questions that we need to answer. Anita, I'm going to let you ask your question first.
I'm curious because it's been a hard year because people have had to manage expectations. Everyone, I believe, almost, unless you've been born between now and the beginning of lockdowns, so many have missed birthdays, so many have missed milestones, marriages, memorials. So much has been put off. And it's Christmas soon. It's New Year soon. And as much as the Grinch is threatening to steal Christmas, we can't let him. I'm curious to know, Demian, how are you keeping the year-end spirit alive and strong for you and yours? What are you doing?
I have not really thought about this. I'm not sure that I really have done a great job of that. We have some family traditions that we can still maintain. I have a plan, but don't tell my kids, a night with I have 6 brothers and sisters, and with them and their families around the world, we're going to have one night. It'll be midnight for us, but where we'll all be together. So trying to still maintain family. And we have a little holiday planned as well, a little skiing around here, but I wouldn't say we really have kept it the same. Just trying to keep some aspects of it to be important and meaningful, but not necessarily trying to pretend that nothing has happened.
But you've still kept it. That's, I think, is really nice. You still kept it.
Well, the kids are home from school, so I got to find some way to keep them, occupied. If not, they'll kill me. All right.
Show on the Grouch's garbage can.
Question for you. So you just flew to South Africa, and I know that you are a big fan of aviation, so I don't want that question. But you flew a couple months ago, and now you flew again. Could you imagine this experience lasting 2 or 3 or 4 years and just being normal, and this is the way aviation is going to be? Or will this turn out, if this really had to be the next normal for a very long extended period of time, would people just stop flying?
It's a great question. And I always say that this is in many ways another 9/11. It's changed the way we will travel. And so one of my clients who I love dearly, she asked me, she said, listen, you and Richard Quest, I worry because you were traveling all the time. Do you miss it? And I thought, Demian, I can't miss what I know I'm not going to have again. The way I used to travel last year, I'm never going to be able to do that again. We used to walk through security without checking little plastic bags of 100 ml bottles. We've had to shift. This is another shift. And as the vaccine rolls out, as testing increases, we'll shift again. And that's why I love why Rise has always said it's about the next normal, not the new normal. So I think I was not surprised to find it was very much like it was 2 months ago when I flew to Tbilisi. I'm hoping it'll open up. I'm very grateful to see people are just get the masks on, use the hand sanitizers, because the sooner we get this under control, the sooner we can take the masks off. So it's just patience, but we're blessed to still travel. I'm here. I got here.
Okay. It is 30-second challenge, by the way, not 60-second challenge.
Rude.
So be it. We got a few headlines for you from this week, and I know we're a little behind schedule. I can imagine Grace panicking back there, so I'm going to go a little quick with mine. My first headline that I saw this week is from the New York Times, how the pandemic inspired a kitchen share scene among out-of-work chefs. And I just thought this was great. You've got these chefs that have these industrial kitchens that are letting it out, most of them free of charge, to other chefs who have lost their restaurants, who have had to close their restaurants, partly so they can just stay active and keep cooking and trying out new recipes, some so that they can actually create a takeout or delivery of some of their signature items or new items. And so I thought that was really interesting. And I took another note, 2 things that what the article said. One was, you can't work from home in the restaurant industry. And in fact, legally, especially in a lot of places in the States, you cannot produce food for mass consumption from a home kitchen. You have to have a certified industrial kitchen. So this is an industry that you can't just shift to home like teaching, like I've been able to do. And the idea that these chefs want to stay relevant, they want to keep cooking, they want to stay interacting with other people in the industry and guests. I just thought it was another really nice example of how in our industry, in the hospitality industry, people come together to share and provide not just food, but experiences for people, not just customers, but chefs and restaurateurs. So I really like that article a lot. And my second headline was more of a research-based one. And again, a little positive news, right? COVID-related restaurant closures mount, but perhaps less dire than forecast. And basically, Kalinowski Equity Research did some statistical analysis, and they compared large chains, which are the largest 38 chains of restaurants in the States, small chains, which they consider the next 450 or so chains, and then independent restaurants. And they're basically finding that the rate of closure that they've been forecasting was excessive. They're actually only seeing 3% of large chain restaurants closing, 8 to 10% of the smaller chains, and still a higher number of independent restaurants. But again, a little less dire, and largely because the restaurants have found ways to continue to generate some revenue, right? We know the takeout, we know the delivery, the outside dining, al fresco dining during the better weather. And clearly there's some problems right now with winter coming and more lockdowns, but hopefully things will not be as bad as we have feared. We'll know later the true results, but again, trying to present a little bit of positive news.
Those are great headlines. And I must say, they link really nicely to what we polled this a little while ago around the second round of lockdowns and how people are getting used to the shock. And they're just weaving that into their way of living, which is why I showed this. And it was interesting to see, because as Thanksgiving happened in the US a couple of weeks ago, we saw that there was incredible demand on the food banks. Equally, there was incredible demand for people to participate in terms of helping out at the food banks. And I thought this was really interesting to say that basically, again, this virus has been agnostic. It doesn't care about borders, economic classes, cultures, religions, ages, nothing. And I thought this was interesting that ultimately, 2 million people expected to go hungry on Thanksgiving Day based on the demands in terms of the food banks, but equally a massive wave of volunteers that didn't exist in the past. And please God, this be part of the legacy of COVID-19, that community spirit and that community muscle stays strong, which takes us to our next slide. And admittedly, this broke my heart. And this is about Sir Philip Green and his entire empire collapsing. But why did this hurt? It wasn't just about the 12,000 people that reported, 15 on this case, in terms of losing their jobs because of some of the chains that he runs. It's because he's an elder. And if I think, Demian, of how many elders we know in the industry, whether it's Stanley Tolman, who I love and adore, Sir Geoffrey Kent, equally a dear friend, dearly loved, who created Abercrombie and Kent, Sir Philip Green, I don't know him personally, but these are people who created in their life's work empires. And this is the current chapter. And it just made me really sad that it's amazing how no one, again, has been immune from this, and how an entire life's work can be challenged in a way that has been beyond any scenario planning, any forecast, any vision. And tens of thousands of people are losing their jobs, which is making their hearts hurt even more. I just thought that was an interesting human aspect of the challenge it is. And now we go to the video. And I must say, I chose this especially for you because I know how much you love aviation. And I know how much you love long videos. So, Demian, don't blink.
This is your pilot speaking. My name is Adrian Oberhensli. I'm working from home today.
Pretty good, pretty good.
7 seconds.
Not bad. I actually had a video I wanted to share this week and I forgot to tell you guys. Maybe I can show it next time. That was great. I appreciate that. Let's, you have credit for, I'll give you 5 seconds extra credit for next time.
Thank you.
So before we launch into our executives in residence segment, we do have a real poll question for you. And we'd like you to answer the following, please. Which of the following do you believe will be most transformed by the current pandemic's impact? All right, let's see what you thought. I'm curious about this one. Wow. Right, business travel, right? So we're still in this idea that business travel is going to be transformed, not just because we don't want to travel or we can't travel, but maybe we don't need to travel because of technology and all the realizations, all the ways business has changed due to this pandemic. And I have to agree. I think, who was it? Was it Bill Gates who said he thinks more than half of business travel is just going to disappear? I have to say, I think it's going to be a long time until it comes back. So I think our audience is astute.
It's interesting you said it as well, and it's absolutely right. I'm amazed by the significance of the difference. But I think what this year has taught is people are questioning, why are they really traveling? And sadly, a lot of business travel has been exposed to be, it's fantastic we can meet, but we can find alternative ways of meeting. It's not necessarily about the place we're meeting at. Wow, interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it's saying that hotel operations and resort experience and dining, they're all going to have some changes, especially in the short term. But the long term major impact is going to be on business travel. And we didn't put it there, but we talked about it last week. Meetings and events sector as well is going to have big transformations.
But that's why it's going to evolve. That's the good thing. It's not out. It's moving forward.
Sure, I agree. It's going to be an evolution. we now have our special executives in residence segment for you. And as we mentioned before, we've asked 6 of our guests. You know, Anita, it was great. Everybody said yes. They all sent in their videos on time. It's just the commitment's been great. Let's see what 6 of our guests from season 1 have to say in terms of an update on what they thought originally.
Brilliant. And so we begin. Our first one is going to be from season 1, episode 2, April 27th. And we were talking to Olivier, who's ultimately the founder of Hosco. And it was all about the next normal of work. And Olivier very kindly came back to give us a sense of what he thought and now what he's seeing. Over to you, Olivier.
I said on Rise back in April that we're seeing a very clear shift of power between talent and employers due to the pandemic, moving from a talent shortage with employers really challenged to recruit towards a market in which professionals are extremely challenged to find their next move. And there's clearly a deficit of employers hiring right now. I said that we would need about 18 months to see 90% of employers recover the pre-COVID headcount. Now, 6 months in, this number is down from 90% to 56%. And this is illustrating that this crisis has deeper consequences and it's more brutal than what we envisioned back in April. And that's clearly a low light. But we need to stay positive. And the recent announcements on the vaccines is the light at the end of the tunnel of this pandemic. I'm convinced that we are now living the last worst bit of it. And we should see a very active market from Q2 onwards in terms of hiring. So let's stay positive and let's stay strong.
So, Anita?
I think what's really good about what Olivia is saying is exactly, let's stay positive. What's critical is the fact that this might be much deeper in terms of its impact, but it is going to move forward. That's the important thing. And we will get through this, just we need to be patient.
Yeah, for me is this idea of the deeper consequences. And again, it goes beyond the labor issue, just the fact that as bad as we thought things were going to be, in contradiction to my headline before that maybe the restaurant closings isn't going to be as bad as it is, it's not just deeper consequences. There are so many consequences we still don't know what they are. And I think that's part of this deeper aspect, right? Not just mental well-being and physical well-being, but how it's going to play out in the industries. There's going to be consequences we're still figuring out years from now. And I think it was, brave of Olivier to bring it up that way, and also to share that number, that 56% number, right, as opposed to 90, saying, I was overly optimistic, things are worse. But I acknowledge that, and the more accurate numbers we have, the better job we can do to help improve things for people.
Indeed. And you mentioned something, Demian, that I think that's really important when we talk about travel, tourism, and hospitality, which links to Olivier's points, but actually links to the entire industry. We have an incredible connection to ultimately many, many industries. So travel and tourism and hospitality might be hit, to your point, but the supply chain impact is massive. And when we think that 80+% of small, medium, and micro enterprises are in the travel, tourism, and hospitality industry, a hotel shuts down and all of those links in the chain are broken. So what you're saying is absolutely right. The depth it's depth and its breadth, unfortunately. So next one.
Our second executive is Michael Levy. Michael is the Chief Operating Officer, one of the co-founders of Citizen M Hotels. And he appeared with us on episode 4, Changes, which was on May 11th. So long ago, May 11th. Let's see what Michael has to say.
Earlier this year, when I joined Rise, I made a prediction that small firms may have an advantage to pivot and adapt due to the ability to move quicker and roll out new ideas given the COVID pandemic. The question now, towards the end of 2020, has that come to fruition and has that been true? I think the answer is yes. The fragmentation in our industry, especially for the larger chains, with the difference of ownership and management, really has had a huge impact. The ownership has had to endure all the financial disasters that this year brought along with the low occupancies, whereas the chains continue to focus on providing a communication with their guests and trying to improve their serviceability. And those are far apart in their objectives. I think that for the smaller companies, They have a close contact with their frequent guests. They know what is required and have been able to focus on the little business that they have with indeed trying to move and adapt faster to those required changes. Think of after the adaptation of course, of the physical, also of the digital adaptation. Have they been able to make touchless stays for guests? Have they been able to roll that out in all of their hotels or just one or there another? I think that the way going forward, we have to see that our industry is not only from a defragmentation challenge, but also we have made our lives very difficult as we're not keeping up with technology and with ESG, the environmental, the social, and the governance. I think that our guests are demanding it. I think that we need to move forward. And my suggestion and my prediction remains that small companies that really respond to tech and to the new requirements that are out there have an ability to move faster. So I stay with what I earlier mentioned in the year. Thank you.
How great for him to be so honest, and like all of our guests coming back the first time, well, coming the first time and the second time. One thing I love about what he was saying, Demian, is about scale and how agility is so dependent in a time of crisis on the ability to rapidly grab innovations, grab opportunities, stop challenges. But the scale impact is massive. So if you think of those smaller businesses, as he's saying, the gymnastics is much more comfortable than if you've got a large organization with multiple companies and countries involved. It's terrifying. It's Titanic versus a catamaran.
Yeah, I actually disagree with Michael, or don't disagree. There's one thing I would clarify is that when we talk about large hotel chains, right, the Marriotts and Accors of the world, absolutely agree, it's slower for them to move. Michael's in that nice ground where he's got a couple dozen hotels and they've got some economies of scale, they have money, they have people, so they can make these changes. When we get to a smaller firm that has one hotel, maybe two, it becomes difficult again, right? It's almost like an inverted U curve, and that middle ground might be where you want to be right now in terms of size, because the small players, they just don't have the resources, people or money to really make maybe some of the changes that they would need to make. So when we talk scale, absolutely, but let's be clear, large, let's call it small and medium firms or small independent individual hotels also suffering a lot.
Indeed. And to your point, it comes down to decision-making and cash flow in so many ways. It's a great point. Lovely. We move now on to our next one, and it's from season 1, episode 5, May 18th. And Gebhard, the CEO of Sandals Resorts, was fantastic in getting a sense of, okay, so what do we think the next destination is of resorts? And now from Jamaica, he's telling us, well, the destination, let's see where we're going to land. Gebhard, over to you.
Hello from a beautiful night here in Montego Bay, Jamaica. I had the honor and the pleasure of being part of season 1 of RISE and have been asked to further comment on my statements at the time. I did say that the budget and mid-scale segments in the hospitality industry are most likely to recover quicker than the rest of the industry. I still believe that this statement is true, although it will be coming at a cost. Rates are under pressure, costs are rising, therefore profit margins will be less than what perhaps we had expected 6 months or 7 months ago. In addition to that, I also think that despite the fact that leisure has been tremendously under pressure, leisure will rebound quick and strong because of a pent-up demand. And within the leisure segment, the all-inclusive segment most likely will have the strongest rebound from what we can see currently. I wish everybody a wonderful Christmas, a happy holiday season, and goodbye.
Such a nice guy. Yeah, I think what was interesting was the pent-up demand issue, right? That we're all just, jonesing to get out there on vacation. I know my family is, right? We understand we can't, but as soon as we really can take a safe vacation, all the money we haven't spent on holidays over the last 8 months is probably not going to stay in my bank account for long, and we'll take some nice holiday. I think it was interesting that he said, the all-inclusive, and I think I haven't seen any research yet, but I'm going to look for it, is I think when people travel, they just might want not to have to make any decisions. They just are going to want to be pampered. And so maybe that all-inclusive where they don't have to decide anything, it can just lie around and just bask in the pleasure of being somewhere else rather than be active and having to organize everything. It might actually have a stronger rebound.
You know, it's interesting, but a big part of that, why all-inclusive is growing, is also control. And that gives specifically links to the issue of protocols. When it's all-inclusive, you're in a bubble. And right now, we've always said that people want to limit contact. They want to limit risk of exposure of the unknown. So all-inclusive, whether it's a resort, a cruise, it has a high degree of control, which eliminates the risk, which, exactly to your point, accelerates the opportunity for people to just shut their eyes and lie back and not have to worry about who's the waiter and do I know that he's wearing a mask and can I trust what's happening? It's a really good point. But he also mentioned something I thought was really important, Demian, and it's something we've talked about. We started Rise in April, assuming it was going to be 100 days. We kept talking about the 100 days. We're now almost 300 days on. The depth and the breadth of what we have all faced this year has been beyond comprehension. So even the predictions are having to be adjusted in terms of the stamina that people are having to demonstrate. And I was speaking to someone, a CEO, a couple of days ago. We've all been accelerating at a high frequency of intensity, which we can do as leaders, but it's the duration that it's having to happen. Gerhard's been doing this the entire year. That's enormously demanding. So I think that's where none of us anticipated the marathon we were on.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Next, our next executive resident is the lovely Elizabeth Blau. And Elizabeth, if you remember, she appeared on episode 8 on June 8th, Restaurant What's on the Menu. And maybe you remember, she was broadcasting from Las Vegas, so it was roughly 3 o'clock in the morning, her time, that she got up to do the show with us. And so, again, great commitment to Rise. And she took up the challenge again and provided this video update for us.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Blau, and so excited to be back on Rise. So my question was, which restaurants will recover faster, fine dining or casual? My answer was fine dining due to flexibility, re, their ability to change and manage spaces, and the prices are higher, so the revenue is stronger. I guess during the initial pandemic, my assumption was that this was really going to last a few months and we were going to move on. Obviously, we are in December and we are going to soon be approaching the year mark of this absolute devastating nightmare for our industry. So I guess for sure my answer would change, because I think the fine dining restaurants have been utterly decimated. There's certainly more space and people feel more comfortable, but there are many people who have absolutely no interest in dining inside. And so probably one of the precepts of fine dining is that, you know, really because of the high levels of service, there's probably less of an emphasis on patios and outdoor dining. And so we've seen the fast casual sector absolutely booming in the US. The Chick-fil-A's and In-N-Out burgers and pizza concepts have absolutely been thriving during this pandemic, and actually even showing year over year same store sales increases. The casual sector, the very casual sector, has also really been hard hit. Chains like Applebee's and Fridays have really seen, dramatic decreases in sales. And so, really, I can't even articulate one category that, that really isn't so hard hit by this, but we have so many family restaurants that we're seeing. So many of our favorites of small locally owned restaurants around the country just closing their doors. It's like reading restaurant obituaries on a daily basis. So what do I think now? Has flexibility and space management allowed luxury restaurants to survive, recover faster? And what have restaurants initiated in the past 4 months to help them build momentum? No, Basically, legislation changes by the minute. Our numbers, they spike, they're going up and down. So trying to manage during this crisis and pivot to delivery and market and takeout models and even creating community kitchens in our restaurants has really been a focus. But nobody is thriving. We're really just surviving at this point. So all I can do is best wishes for everyone for 2021. I hope the universe knows that we're all ready to be done with this at the end of 2020. But thank you, Rise, for allowing us to share our platforms from around the world.
She's gorgeous. How lovely. And like all of our guests, how fantastic to be so honest. I think it's really quite touching. You know what I think was interesting, Demian, about what she was saying is that this year has reprogrammed us all. We've all found alternative ways of dining, that once we get sick of our own cooking, there are delivery agents, there are ways of eating outside, which are now getting hit if you're in the Northern Hemisphere by winter moving in. So even if you can eat outside, it's too cold to eat outside. For the restaurant industry, I've never known a better time to tip heavily than now, because it's just in addition to the infrastructure being challenged, the customage is being reprogrammed to think safer, think cheaper, think easier, and that just takes away from the experience. I find it heartbreaking, and I'm really grateful for her honesty in that.
Yeah, I think for me, the fact that she was, we said it in the beginning, I think from the first episode, we don't have any answers on this show. We just have the questions, and maybe we can raise some of the questions and discuss them and make people feel comfortable. And I think this is a perfect example, right? We asked her a question 5 months ago. She gave her best idea of an answer, and now recognizes, I didn't have the answer. Things have evolved differently than we thought, and so I was wrong, and this is why, and this is what it means. And I think that's exactly what Rise has been about, but also what everybody is learning throughout this pandemic is it's not about really predicting the future. It's about evolving, going with the flow, adapting, and acknowledging that we don't know. It's the first time. This is this live case study with no answers, and I think that really captured that.
Absolutely, but she's great, and clearly she was filming this at a much more comfortable time of day. So thank you, Elizabeth. Brilliant. And now we go on to episode 9 in season 1 on June the 15th. Haldane Dodd, head of communications at ATAG, talking about one of my favorite segments, and that is air travel and the future of air travel. Haldane, over to you.
Well, happy International Civil Aviation Day, and thank you for having me back on Rise. The last time I was here was in June. We were kind of expecting a little bit of a rise in passenger numbers in July, August period. It happened, but that's really leveled off and actually started to decline again as more governments start to put in place quarantine measures and other travel restrictions that are having the real impact on whether people fly or not. We tend to find that once people are able to travel comfortably without the uncertainty that travel restrictions bring, that they're actually relatively comfortable to travel. But of course, everything that we can do to try and reduce the risk of transmission on board, including health checks, inoculations, and also the cleaning procedures that we have on board are welcomed by passengers. But the biggest issue seems to be around the uncertainty of travel. And once governments can solve that, then we will start to have passenger numbers improve again. Thank you very much. Okay,
honestly. Happy International Civil Aviation Day. Did you know that existed?
It does. The UN has a day allocated for every single day of the year, whether it's Day of Water, Day of Literacy, Day of Aviation, World Tourism Day, which is September 27th, Grouch Day, which is every Monday. So it is an official day.
Okay. Look, more seriously, I think the interesting part for me was uncertainty and industry working with government, right? The industry can't do this alone. Elizabeth alluded to it before as well. Legislation is changing. it's all about this relationship, right? Nobody can do things alone. The government can't do it alone. The industry can't do it alone. And there's probably no better example than aviation.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that this year has done. The industry, travel, tourism, hospitality, has always said we need to speak with one voice. We need to. This year, it's had to. So transport's working with aviation, which was his transport, working with tourism, working with health and WHO. All of these entities are being forced to have a conversation because travel and tourism now is about the entire experience chain, not just the link of the chain figuring it out. So I think this is a theme of this year. We either all win or we all lose. And I think that's a really important one. And I like the fact that many have actually brought it up. So, you know what I find fascinating about this whole process, and we've still got one more interview to go, correct?
Yes.
Is how open these leaders have been. I've never seen such courage and such honesty coming through without fear of speaking, which I think is really nice.
Well, hopefully that's a little bit is due to the way we do Rise and their comfort with us. But I think part of it is also, again, maybe the pandemic and the fact that we're all in this together has allowed people to let their guard down a little bit and be more honest and be more humble and acknowledging what they don't know. You acknowledge all the time everything you don't know. And I think that's just, it's kudos to you for that. Let's look at our last video, right, with Niall, who's talking about Tourism Ireland. And he was on episode 12 on July 6th, way back in July. And he was Destinations, Are We There Yet? So let's find out now, are we there yet now?
Hello, Demian and Anita, and great to see you on the Rise, and thank you for asking me back. I was reflecting on my last performance on the show, which was in early July, when we asked the question, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And I described the situation then as a catastrophe, really, and things that started to look worse at that time, and infection levels were starting to increase in the United States and Great Britain. And boy, did they get worse, and it has been a very, very difficult year for the 300 million plus people who work in our industry around the globe. However, it's fair to say hope is on the horizon. We've had good news in the last week or two from 3 potential vaccines and maybe more to come, that 2021 is the year for recovery. So that's what we're setting out our stall on in Tourism Ireland, the idea of restart, rebuild, redesign, exactly what we said last July. It's about supporting our industry, it's bringing connectivity back to Ireland and listening to our customer. And what they're telling us through all the research we've conducted in the last number of months is that they want to get back to familiar destinations, they want to get back to where they feel safe, and they want to get back to visiting their friends and family. So we're looking at 2021 as a year of hope and a year of recovery. I wish you all well and Rise. Congratulations on the great work that you've done in keeping us all connected. Greetings from Dublin in Ireland. Happy Christmas to everybody. I hope you have a great time with your family and look forward to seeing you all in Ireland in 2021. Thank you.
And a beautiful man. And I must say that we talked about this when he was with us in Rise in July about why bother? Why should destinations bother continuing to market? And he is a remarkable individual to follow on social platforms. He's been busy the entire year, constantly, whether it's him on holiday, people in the industry, the Chamber of Commerce, tourism industry, aviation, whatever it might be, constant. To the point, Demian, where of all CEOs in Ireland, across all industries and government, he was announced to be the #1 CEO in the country when it came to social media presence and engagement, which is quite remarkable for a destination that was effectively shut off as an island destination for the entire year. I think it's really quite something.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I also think people want to get back to familiar destinations and to family and friends. And family and friends, absolutely. The familiar destinations, I find that interesting because I was reading something the other day which said that we're much more likely now to want to go closer to home, even after the pandemic, and with more familiarity. And this idea of these big, let's go to Antarctica on a cruise, or let's go on a safari, or let's go to this very unusual place, might be a little bit out of favor for the short term. It might be more like, oh, you know what? We've been to this place before. We loved it. Let's go back there where we feel welcome, we feel at home, and maybe feel safe because we know it. So again, it's one of these, what's going to happen as a result of all this? We don't have clear answers. And I just think it's going to be so interesting to see over the next few years how that evolves.
Indeed.
And
And I think
if it's okay, let's take a couple questions from the audience that we didn't get a chance to with the guests and see what they have to say. Sarah, do we have any questions?
Yes. Sven asks, in your opinion, which of the guests had the most surprising update?
Surprising, I don't know. I think, Elizabeth's to me really stood out because it really was a prediction, right? It really was. This is why I think luxury is going to outperform. And she was wrong, as she acknowledged. And so it wasn't, I actually thought when she had said that back in the day, I didn't know if I agreed. I didn't, I'm not saying that I had the foresight, but the fact that things panned out so differently than we thought, I think that's the message there. I don't think there was a shock to me from what anybody said. You?
I didn't find a shock because we're all in touch with the news and what's happening. But I think Haldane was important because back in June, we thought the issue of travel was going to be about air quality, masks, hand sanitizers, thermometers. It's not, it's government, it's regulations. People might trust, they trust aviation. They don't trust the borders. That to me, I think was the most profound shift.
So concerned and confident. All right, I'm concerned that we're eventually going to have a 1-year anniversary show. And normally that would be, hey, we made it a year, we'll celebrate a year. If we're celebrating a year anniversary show, it means we're still stuck in this pandemic and in this crisis and our industry is still under threat. So my concern is we're going to have a 1-year anniversary show.
I'm confident we're going to have a 1-year anniversary show because we committed to being with the Rise community as long as we added value. And I'm confident that we're not going to be stuck. We're going to be in a different place. We're going to be in a place where the vaccine is rolling out, quick testing is taking place, people are more confident, people are getting back out again. We're starting to ramp up to summer season in the Northern Hemisphere. We will not be in the stuck normal. We'll be in the next normal.
Yeah, I mean, how much fun would that be to actually have episodes where we're just talking about, and look at only providing good news and saying, look, restaurant sales are up 80%, hotel occupancy is close to pre-pandemic levels. I mean, that'll be great when we can report things like that, and then also talk about success stories. Look how, or even look how dining has changed, and look how much better it is now as a result, or look how much nicer it is to fly than before, whatever. That would actually be really nice.
And I think that you make a really good point. We didn't call this program Sync. We called it Rise. So we're going to keep going until we rise. Simple.
Well said.
Stunning. So to that point, yay! Next episode. Can I do this, please?
Please.
Great. So this is our finale episode for season 2. This will be our next episode. We are not doing Rise in Practice. We are going to be live next week. So please, everyone, mark your calendars for next Monday, December 14th. And we thought, exactly to your point, Demian, we're going to end it off being grateful and recognizing how is the industry giving back? How through all of this, with people recognizing how important it is to stay connected and stay caring, how has the industry been rising this year to take care of itself? We have 2 outstanding guests who are coming from 2 different angles, 2 different initiatives, who are going to be focusing very much on looking at it from the point of view of what are people doing to really tap into the sentiment of we must all care, or we don't make it through to 2021. So please, everyone, join us for that. That's going to be a really special one. And you're still going to be a grouch.
I might be a grouch in an elf costume.
Still green.
That's all I can do. Oh, I can come as the Grinch. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next episode, partly because, like we said, we need to, there's so many positives that we just don't recognize sometimes. All the great things people are doing to help each other during this crisis, and especially at this season. And I think it's important to acknowledge those and help people understand the ways that they may not realize that they are actually helping people. Every time you order food from a restaurant, you're helping that restaurant. And there are many ways we're doing it without realizing, and many more ways we can do it without it necessarily even being a financial investment. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. So until then, we've got a week to go. Please do let us know what you want to see in season 3. We'll give you all the information next week as to when we're going to restart season 3 in January. But please send us a message through either our Twitter account, our email. You see it in front of us. All of our episodes are on rise-weekly.com. So if you get bored over the holidays, please take a look back. It's fascinating to see how our year has unfolded. And it's been very special because we've seen a lot of other programs, a lot of webinars start to, quite honestly, go quiet because they've lost content, they've lost contacts. But everyone on Rise has made Rise relevant. You've made it meaningful, and you've given Demian and I a really good reason to keep on keeping on, and we're grateful for that. But from my side, before we close off, as always, a very special loving thanks to our Wizards of Oz, to Jessica, Grace, Sarah, and Joanne, who are behind the velvet curtain. To all of you who are watching, thank you very much from my side. Before I hand it back to Demian to close, as always, stay strong, stay safe, stay hopeful, keep your hands clean, and stay with Rise.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great week. And hopefully, if I see you on the ski slopes, stay 2 meters away.